Welcome to today's episode. We have a very exciting guest lined up, but for those of you who are new to the show, the podcast is sponsored by Plutus Agents. We help residential contractors eliminate the manual chaos in scheduling, client communications, and subcontractor coordination, so they can stop wasting time on the admin, increase their margins, and keep building with the same team. A lot of our clients, they come to us overwhelmed because their growth outpaces their systems, but with the right automations in place, they're able to scale efficiently without burning out their crew. So if that sounds like you or someone else you know, make sure to stick around for future episodes. If you're interested in a free growth consultation, just connect with me on LinkedIn and message me the word growth. But now, speaking of scaling the right way, let's jump into today's conversation. So I'm joined by Paul Adams, the strategic mind behind Columbia Home Services, a fast-growing home services platform that has already acquired over 10 legacy firms in HVAC, plumbing, and electrical in just over a year. As a serial entrepreneur, he has had a history of successful scaling strategies and has recently been recognized at the American Business Awards for visionary leadership. Paul, it's great to have you.
Hey, good morning. It's great to be on.
Awesome. So what inspired you to create Columbia Home Services? What was the gap you were seeing in that home services industry?
I think having spent a career in the trades that spans 30 years, often it's easy to recognize that these businesses are mom and pop. They're legacy brands, and often the owners don't have an exit strategy. And essential services is so critical to our communities and our businesses. I saw an opportunity to sort of aggregate really well-performing legacy brands and continue those legacies in those markets. But the idea was to, put more gas in the tank. And so without an exit strategy, many of these sellers, aren't aware of what their options really are. And we saw an opportunity to sort of become a partner and assist with that transition, and maintain taking care and custody of that legacy.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know there's millions of business owners that just kind of sell off because they didn't really have a strategy going into it. So how would you say you differentiate yourself from other platforms in that industry?
Well, look, there's a lot of interest in the trade space. It's not going anywhere. It's recession proof. Everybody needs to turn lights on, toilets to flush, and houses to cool. So, I think the idea is that essential services and what we offer to these businesses is longevity. And we can help these businesses realize more valuation, and, we can sort of give them an opportunity to do things maybe that they haven't done before. And often these business owners, they sort of hit an inflection point, and the question is, what can we do different? But it's one thing when a financial investment is made, but what they're really looking for is whoever's investing or buying or partnering, do they understand the trades? And I think our advantage is we have multiple years of experience in plumbing, in HVAC, in electrical. And that resonates with a seller because we're not just making a financial investment, we're actually bringing something to the table that can elevate these businesses. So sometimes the exit strategy is not an immediate, I'm just going to get paid and I'm going to leave. It's, hey, I want to deleverage myself and I want to plan and I want to maybe invest a little bit, maybe get a second bite at the apple. And I want to kind of see my legacy carry on. And so I'm willing to work another 1, 2, 3 years to assist with that transition. But what makes it really resonate with them is that they're working with people that understand the vernacular, that have lived a day in their shoes, and can sort of relate to what they have to do with their employees and their customers.
Yeah, definitely. I know trust is huge in financial decisions, but I feel like especially with these legacy businesses, if you know how it works, then they're going to trust you and they're going to be willing to invest.
Yeah, and like any sale, you want to build a relationship first.
Yeah.
So I think another differentiator with us is we're not going to just do any deal for the sake of doing a deal. We have very specific purchasing criteria. We take the necessary time to vet the business out, vet the owner out. And quite honestly, if it's a match, great. If it's not, not every deal needs to happen. And so, we want to make sure that we're firing in all cylinders post close. And in order to do that, the relationship comes well before you start evaluating the numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. So then with that, who is your ideal target business to partner with?
I think that there are a number of legacy businesses out there that are in that, 15 to 20 years. The owner is not ready to retire, but they've again hit a point where they don't know how to take it from 10 million to 15 million or from 15 to 20. And so they're saying to themselves, if I do what I've always done, I'm going to get what I've always got. And so what they're doing is they're going out in the market and they're feeling out if there are financial partners that can give them the capital, but also give them the operational expertise to take them from point A to point B. Because let's be honest, entrepreneurs are a unique breed and they don't take no for an answer. And when they have roadblocks and challenges, they do just about anything to overcome them. And that's what makes them somewhat remarkable people, albeit they're tough to manage, right?
Yeah.
So they've never actually worked with a partner before. So there is a learning curve, but if we find those sort of mid-sized companies with still the fire in the gut to succeed, that's where our purchasing criteria start. And then, if we can get that owner to consider maybe rolling some equity, putting some skin in the game into the much larger portfolio, and then graciously accepting the help, not only of just the capital, but of what we bring to the table as operators, then I think that they can see that realized gain in valuation. And then as typical middle market private equity does, there's somewhat of a horizon where they're going to get out and that seller is going to realize more for their blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah, definitely. So it sounds like those who are ready to grow and have the hungry people still in there, and then you just come in with the efficiency to make sure that they can do it successfully.
Yeah. And the other critical piece is, this is an old cliche, change. People don't adjust to change. Well, it's true. They don't. What we try to do is minimize the amount of change. So our role is to work in the shadows of these owners, give them the fuel, but when they approach their customers and they're perceived by their employees, nothing's changed. And when things don't noticeably change, people don't go to dark places. And people hear me say that all the time. Well, what do you mean by dark places? Well, when there's change, you just naturally think of something catastrophe. You're like, oh, I'm going to have to start looking for a new job. We don't know what's going to happen. And it's what we tell ourselves. And so we try to minimize that because what it does is it allows the business to actually elevate because we can make noticeable changes with our scale. Perhaps maybe the benefits improve. Maybe perhaps the 401k is introduced. Maybe perhaps payroll's never missed. All these things start to be perceived by the employee as positive, which translates to that customer first mentality. And then it just snowballs really positively. So like what I try to impress upon people is that when you're acquiring a company, less disruption is best.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that actually. So you're kind of like a external growth partner in the shadows, helping them make sure everything's going smoothly.
A growth ninja.
I like that. Like a Batman almost.
There you are. There you are.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is you're building that continuous relationship with the seller and you're making them feel like they still can have that entrepreneurial spirit, right? Because you never want to kill that.
Yeah.
What you're really evaluating is their learning agility. Like, does the individual have the gas? And when they hit the pedal, that car just moves. Or when they turn ignition, Does it take once or twice, or does they keep hitting the ignition? It just doesn't start. That's what we have to evaluate. But on the entrepreneurial side, you want them to feel business is mine, the people are mine, I've got my culture, and now I've got this financial partner behind me who's giving me also operational expertise to take my business to that next level.
Yeah, that's great. You make sure that the entrepreneur himself or herself stays in control, kind of like the way they like it. So, what's some common mistakes that you see with other platforms or founders making in this space?
Well, I think a lot of investment comes from private equity. While I'm backed by private equity, we take on the identity of our private equity firm, whether we like it or not. And with ours, we have a focus on people. It's like a key tenet in our private equity culture that invested in and helped kind of realize Columbia Home Services. So some of them are more traditional, very financially oriented. Not to say we're not financially oriented.
Yeah.
We just have a different method to the madness that works, because in this business, when you're buying it, what are you really buying? An account list, a name, a website, maybe a phone number. But at the end of the day, these people, it's a people business. It's a service business. That's what you're buying. So like, people have to be sort of the foundation of what you're doing. And so the mistake I often see is that people that make investments into space don't focus enough on the value proposition for the employee. And today in our country, we have over 1 million plus shortage of labor to perform these essential services. So when you have an acquisition, you have people. They're your most important commodity. And so you have to constantly like increase that value proposition. And that's where I think some investments run amok, is that they just don't put the people first. But I feel we've gotten that right. And it's evident by our retention rates and the focus that we put on it. And the fact that, we do have a human resources department that is there supporting the people.
Yeah, people are definitely one of the most important things. And you spoke about value proposition. So I know you started scaling home services platforms through your Royal House partners and Trudella. So what did you learn through integrating, I believe it was 15 businesses into that kind of one unified platform?
Wow. I've learned a lot. I've probably made more mistakes than I've had success, but that's just par for the course if you're an entrepreneur, I think. Look, simple's best, and the pace of integration post-close is often the biggest challenge. We call it organized chaos, and it is simply the hardest thing to do when you have, whether it's 15 brands or 12 brands or 20 brands. When you're implementing new payroll software, accounting software, implementing a field service management system, and you're doing that simultaneously, begs the question whether that's the right approach. And I've done fast and furious integration. I've done midstream integration, and I've done limited integration. And what I've learned is the pace is often the biggest barometer of your success. So you can do all these things and they all make good sense to elevate the business, but it's the pace at which you do it. So I often say to myself, I think we measure our success by being on the path, not racing for the finish.
I love that. That's a really great insight. I know you were saying earlier, people are they don't like change, which is so true. But especially with like tech innovation or tech integration into legacy businesses, they usually have those legacy systems still. So kind of going into it slowly, like you were saying, is definitely the best approach, which you've seen success with. So how about in 2024? I know Columbia Home Services started in 2023, right? So was there anything you tried in 2024 that didn't really go as planned?
Well, look, there's a lot of reflection after every deal. And whether the deal's large or small, it takes the same amount of effort. So after each deal, you learn something new about what to do, what not to what not to do. So it's continually evolving our process of seamless transactions. But the reality is every transaction is different. So they're always throwing curveballs and sliders, and you've got a few skeletons in the closet. You just have to accept that that comes with the deal world. However, I think broadly we have gotten better at our checkpoints and diligence. We've started to assess leadership. Like, let's just say a business meets your purchasing criteria. And let's say your gut instinct is that the seller would be a good partner. Is that really enough to gauge whether you want to do the deal? One of the things that we did after our first few deals, we implemented the culture index, and we just wanted to understand what type of leader we were working with. Every leader is different. And so there are those that are more cerebral about things. There are sales profiles like mine, which is a rainmaker, that is completely different than a scholar or a philosopher. So I think what was important about making that adjustment was really just trying to understand what that leader's thinking process is and try to get some sort of indication of past behavior so that we could kind of forecast how we need to work with that individual. Imagine every time if you could come into the office, and I know that's not really a natural thing these days because everybody works from home. If you came into the office and you saw everybody's culture index profile on their door, would it help you in the conversation? I think that that's just sort of the question we asked ourselves is like, do we know enough about these folk to make an informed decision as to whether they're the right partner? And so, again, back to people, back to leadership, management. That's where it starts, right? So we're just using some tools now that give us a better barometer of those partners. And then I think the other big area that has noticeably taken off that's really complemented post 24 is really the interest and limited, but what soon will grow is the utilization of AI and how it will revolutionize how we communicate with our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I know mentality and thinking process is huge and when you're working with someone. Have you read the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill?
I have not.
So it's kind of all about how someone thinks and how they can, acquire tangible assets, riches. So I think that's very important to understand who you're working with and the mentality standpoint. And then AI too. That's absolutely one of the biggest things right now. So we'll kind of go along with that. So you know about AI, obviously, and integration with AI. So are you still seeing any friction, whether in hiring or tech adoption like AI or operational alignment, anything like that right now?
Well, look, tech adoption in the trades is probably one of the biggest challenges. You talked earlier, people don't like change. Well, there is an archaic sort of technology trend in the trades. And I commend those that are trying to elevate the use of technology. But let's be honest, garbage in, garbage out. If you can't get your technicians, plumbers, electricians to close a ticket out in ServiceTitan, then the system is just a system. The other thing is, if it's just being used as a reporting tool and doesn't help somebody actually perform their work, then again, it's just a system. So there's a lot of reasons why user adoption is low, but for newer generations, they're more apt to adopt the utilization of technology. We just have to be, again, really careful about the pace at which we introduce it. These AI tools are great, but there are a lot of AI tools that are what I call islands. They address specific issues. And a business can't have 20 different AI tools to elevate its performance.
Mm-hmm.
So the big question is, at what point will AI become more or less embedded in the broader systems we use so that we can be more effective and efficient with them? Because today we've seen some great referral apps We've seen some great recruiting apps. We've seen some great apps that go into your field management system and identify opportunities. We see some great AI apps that, do automated text and email 24/7 so that we don't have to staff the phones. But those are 4 or 5 different vendors, and you would have to hire someone just to manage those vendors. So, like, the ideas are great. The technology is pretty slick, but let's be honest, companies have to be efficient, and AI has got a place, but we just haven't quite figured out where it is and where it makes the single biggest contribution. But look, it's exciting. We're trying different things, but we can't get too excited because you take on too much, you're not going to get really the bang for the buck.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. No one wants, 20 logins to different services or apps to make sure that things are running, smoothly. It all has to be systematized. So if you use AI, it has to speak to each other. So it's nothing like this there kind of thing. I totally agree.
And we had just gotten to a point, I think, with SaaS models where the APIs were open. So we could start taking those islands that existed in the SaaS world and integrating them. But we're just there. So when you think about Sage Intacct and how it integrates seamlessly with ServiceTitan, and then you take your ADP Workforce Now and integrate it, and all three talk through open APIs, that's pretty slick, right? Because each one of them has their subject matter expertise, but like the fact that they all talk to each other, that's pretty impactful. So when you have a decentralized model like we have, and you are trying to get everybody a little bit more organized and not look like a loose federation of employers, we just got there. Now AI is rolling out and we're back to where we were when we started with SaaS, and we're kind of like, we're juggling and we're like, man, which one do we work with?
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I was just doing a little research on that. I just posted on LinkedIn like maybe last week about how I feel as though SaaS is kind of dying because you can create your own custom internal tools with no code and AI. And then they all talk to each other and you don't have to go, I'm not talking down on Salesforce, but it's like one size fits all kind of thing. If you can create it yourself and make sure it fits with your employees and your systems, then that's going to be the best thing moving forward.
And I think the advantage is that I don't think we're going to have to wait long.
No.
Where AI was 6 months ago and where it is today is like revolutionary. So I think we just have to be, again, patient. We have to do our due diligence, and we just gotta, at least play around with this stuff to see where it might fit, because some of these SaaS models, like a ServiceTitan, it's not going away. So it could be, maybe more efficient, more effective if something could link to it. And that's what we have to kind of vet out over time.
Yeah, and I agree. It's not going to take very long to get all this kind of going and connected. But so let's talk about how you're prioritizing scaling. So what are you prioritizing right now that will get you to your growth targets for, say, 2026?
Well, look, we did 12 acquisitions and we just completed a very critical merger. And it's the first merger that the industry's seen in quite some period of time. So look, we doubled in size. So we've created such scale that we are afforded the opportunity to slow down our inorganic pace and focus more on the organic, because we've invested in these businesses. We have leaders, but we're trying to standardize our operating procedures. We're trying to standardize our systems. And I think we have a pretty good outlook for 26. But look, the industry's got a lot of headwind. We have raw materials is still high. The tariffs are affecting the cost of making the goods that we install and service. In addition, is up. We have our A2L. So the refrigerant change is now mildly flammable. We have training issues. The cost has gone up. We have availability issues on refrigerant. So look, we've got a lot of headwind, but with scale, you can overcome this headwind a little bit easier. And, I talked earlier about organized chaos. With 12 acquisitions and a merger of two cultures, you've got some noticeable change. We might not be doing significant change at the operating level, but at least at the way the corporation manages, figuring out the right people to be in the right seats, doing the work that really matters. That's a distraction right now, but they're working through that. And I think they're going to put together a pretty strong plan for next year. And I think again, because of scale, I think it'll be a little easier for us to weather the storm. But we've got some economic challenges out there that, we could use a little help, and we'll just see how it happens. But I have all the confidence in our C-suite and our leadership team and our CEO that is going to drive that plan next year. And they've already started kind of working through the process of building that budget and evaluating, hey, what are going to be the hurdles that we need to overcome? But organic growth is going to be the focus, no doubt.
Yeah, no, I see that. I can see how you have a lot of headwinds, and you were talking about labor shortages earlier too. So having confidence in your C-suite is amazing, and constant iteration. I know you've been doing that for a while, so I think it'll go well. But so to ensure you have smooth transitions between your partners, like post close, how do you go about that?
Look, there's a sales process to get the deal to close. And there are a lot of commitments that are made prior to close. I think you have to be conscientious of what commitments you make, and you have to follow through on those. And I think a lot of it for these sellers is face time. So when you close a business, as leaders, you need to be in front of these partners, having these conversations about, one size doesn't fit all, the pace at which you're going to change something. So whether the business needs a system, whether it needs additional headcount, whatever it is, these conversations have to happen immediately. But there is a resting period post-close. So what ends up happening is there's a certain amount of deal fatigue that happens getting through close. I think our business likes to allow the partner to just take a breather. So often when we do a deal, we might leave that business alone for a few months. It could be a year. But there's constant touch points that I think make sense. But again, we want the partner to feel like they're a partner, not like they're being told. So when you get through the tough close, then you got to have them take a breather. And then you have to kind of set, hey, what are going to be the short term? What are the medium term and the long term objectives? You said you wanted to grow organically. You've never had any dedicated sales reps. How do we get that going? And it sounds simple, but that's a cultural change because 80% of what gets sold in our industry gets sold through a technician. So that sounds very rudimentary, but it's really not. So those are the kind of things that I think the touch points have to happen, but not too much, not too soon. But the conversations need to be more frequent because these sellers need to feel like they're being heard.
Yeah, definitely. I know we talked about earlier you being a growth ninja kind of thing. So I can see that. You give them a timeline and objectives and see where they want to be, but you kind of stay in the shadows for as long as you need to be. That makes sense. So then looking into the future, how would you plan to scale your reputation as continuing that value-driven partner rather than just an acquirer? I know you've been doing very well at that so far, but say going into 2026.
Well, I think that there are some key things that we will measure. Employee retention. I mean, you got to have 85+% retention to do this thing at a high level of accomplishment. 2 is you have to have sustained organic growth that outpaces the market. And so, those 2 things just jump off the page. People and productive people. And then of course, the value prop that I talked about earlier, when someone evaluates their current situation, how well do they feel about it? that's important. We need to continue the inorganic strategy, but I don't think we need to go at the same pace that we've been going at. I think we tighten the purchasing criteria, we narrow the guardrails, and we make really well-informed decisions that the investment committee can get behind. We hope by the time we're ready to do some future acquisition that we're better at integration. We're better at onboarding. And so, you measure your efficiency and effectiveness of integration so that, you don't, again, I called it a loose federation of companies. You just don't have these, groups out there doing their own thing, right? There has to be a plan. So a lot of these are kind of key tenets that, kind of govern what we'll be doing going forward. Because in the beginning, the hardest part of doing a buy and build strategy is getting in business, finding the right financial partners, finding the right sellers. We've been fortunate. We got both. But in order to fire on all cylinders now, you got to come back to the things that we said we were going to do when we told our investors and we told our partners. We're going to grow organically. We're going to grow inorganically. We're going to retain our employees. We're going to make sure the value proposition's strong and so forth. So those are kind of some of the key things that I think will just kind of get us where we need to be, call it next year and beyond.
Yeah, so you were saying you can grow more organically now, which is great. And you said integration is kind of one of the big things. Now, this may seem like a broader kind of question, but say you had hypothetically, a magic wand, and you could just fix all your problems going forward. That one thing in your business, say it's integration or say it's growing organically rather than inorganically. What would that one fix be to make sure nothing's holding you back?
I would professionalize the way we sell. So I would do two things. I would have professional salespeople in every market, and I would educate the customer on their options for purchasing. Two things happen. When technical people sell what we sell, it sometimes goes above the customer's head. So we've got to somewhat professionalize the way we sell. Number two is often in the industry, people pay cash, and cash is king. But let's be honest, everything's getting more expensive. So do people have or know what their options are to purchase, whether it's a third-party finance, whether it's a lease? So like if I had a magic wand, I would professionalize the sales force. I would be deliberate, or what I call relentlessly boring, about financing and leasing, and organic would take off.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sales is absolutely one of the most important things. And you were saying a tech salesperson might not be the best talking to customers. And that makes sense because I think selling the outcome rather than the technical aspects is what will make the sale happen.
Well, and people sell what they're comfortable selling. So we probably leave things on the table. And then, of course, what you always have to train on is overcoming objection. So those are things that are near and dear to me. I think it's probably my sales profile. That's why my wand is focused on the organic side, because I think that that's where, if you're trying to buy and build, great. We've got the buying down pretty well. We've demonstrated that. Now what we got to do is put a sustained organic strategy to outpace the market year after year after year to increase the valuation of our company.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some of the shifts you're seeing in this upcoming 12 to 18 months, or challenges that may be emerging that you think others aren't seeing yet?
Well, I can only highlight that cash sales is not sustainable. The average ticket for a residential HVAC system is north of $10,000. It's somewhat synonymous with buying a car, sending your kid to college. So there are ways to purchase that accommodate prime, near prime, subprime buyers. There has to be a revolution in how people purchase essential services. It's just not sustainable for contractors to expect that someone pay cash. And when they don't pay cash, then what they'll do is they will defer placement until it's a problem, which really affects the contractor negatively, because people that defer, then they're calling for service or replacement. We may not be able to get to them because people just deferred the inevitable. So, I think it would make more sense for customers to be a bit more proactive and maintain their systems. Under a lease for an HVAC system, labor parts and warranty are all included. It's a worry-free service that people just don't understand it's available. So again, I think that is something that I would want to make everyone aware of, that this stuff's not getting cheaper. It's becoming less mechanical, more communicating. And when it becomes more communicating, it becomes more expensive. And with all the other economic factors like tariffs or transportation cost or raw material cost, you put that on top. Again, how is somebody going to afford, a system? And remember, the higher the efficiency rating of the system, the higher the cost.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect way to end this off, honestly. Perfect way to wrap this up. Gives everyone something to think about, Well, huge thank you to you, Mr. Paul Adams, for sharing those insights and the strategy behind Columbia Home Services. You've had a pretty impressive growth in a short period of time, and that's incredible. So for everyone watching, if you've enjoyed the conversation, just be sure to subscribe, leave a review, share with another residential contractor or founder in your circle. And if you're looking to scale your operations with less chaos and more control, go to plutusagents.ai. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, Owen.